Is Zuffa Boxing good for the sport, or is it bad? Let's digest the good, the bad, and the ugly. So contrary to popular belief, Zuffa Boxing isn't all bad for the sport of boxing. It has its positives. The first one we're going to speak about, more options for fighters. More opportunities to make money, more opportunities for lower level fighters to actually get somewhere where they can prove themselves that doesn't require them to be a massive name. They can get somewhere just based off of merit. We have seen it with F.A. Jagba recently. No one's fighting F.A. Jagba. I'm telling you that now. His style isn't pleasing. It is a low risk, relatively high reward fight, as we've seen with Martin Bakole fighting him. No one was going to fight him. Callum Walsh, very similar career, stagnated a little bit. Wasn't at the top of the tree. Came through, first Zuffa fight, beat Ocampo, which is a good opponent to beat, to be fair. So, in terms of a positive, yes, you know, more opportunities, more options for fighters. I'm backing that. There is no denying that. It is great from that point of view. Another positive we have goes to the Muhammad Ali Act changes that Zuffa Boxing want to make. It is essentially going to remove a lot of the excessive belts and championships that we have in the sport of boxing. WBC Silver, for example, will probably disappear. WBC Franchise Championship will disappear. WBA Super Champions will disappear. Interim champions will only be able to be awarded if the current champion cannot fight for any reason. That could be injury, lack of availability to travel, etc., etc. It undilutes the sport a little bit, makes it easier for casual fans to track in terms of the number of belts. I like it. The one belt thing I'll come on to in the negatives, because I do think it is a negative. Let me know in the comments if you actually think that or not. But yeah, in terms of diluting it a bit so we don't have super intergalactic, supreme bad BMF, them kind of championships. Yeah, it's good. I like that. Positive number 3. All fighters who stand for Zuffa will be mandated, and this is by the Muhammad Ali Act changes that they are looking to bring in. They will be mandated to have a training facility provided by Zuffa Boxing, which means that them fighters who maybe are not big names, they're working the 9 to 5s, that kind of thing, them not journeymen, I don't want to say that, the fighters that don't have that commercial value yet to be able to go to a big gym, get a full training team, pay somebody some of their purse, etc. They will actually be able to train out of, I'm assuming it's going to be one of the UFC performance facilities that they have got. Zuffa have to provide it. That is massive for the fighters that aren't making the mega money like a Conor Benn, for example. That is good. That is a positive. I like that. Number 4 on the positives list, all of the finances do need to be made public. We are not going to end up in the situation where the UFC have, where they're getting class action lawsuits against them because fighters are saying, look, you're not paying me enough. You're bringing in multi-millions of pounds every single one of these events that you put on, and I am getting paid an absolute pittance. Fighters are going to be able to see what the organisation they are fighting for is bringing in, which helps them better when they are renegotiating contracts, negotiating fight purses, etc., etc. That was a big worry for me, for the entirety of the boxing world, was that we end up in a situation where these fighters stand for Zuffa. If, let's say, Zuffa, in a hypothetical situation, ended up taking over boxing, it monopolised boxing the same way that the UFC has in MMA, these fighters will not be in a situation where they are being grossly underpaid, because all of the information needs to be made public. That is in the Muhammad Ali Act changes that they are looking at putting in place. So there is no getting away from it. If the information needs to be public, it will be made that way. Number 5, we have got fighter insurance. This is mega. If you're signing for Zuffa, you essentially get a medical insurance up to, I think it was $20,000. It might be more. I think it might have been up to 50. I'll have to go and double check. But regardless, yes, they will get insurance. So if they get injured in a fight and cannot fight, they don't have to worry about their own insurance having to cover it. Zuffa Boxing must provide them an insurance that says if you get injured in one of our fights, we will essentially cover, number 1 in America, the medical bill. Number 2, we will cover any sort of loss of earnings, that kind of stuff. I would very much like to see a copy of the insurance document. It is unlikely we will ever see that come to light, but If it does, I'll definitely do a video on it, so you know what to do. Subscribe if you want to be kept up to date with everything relating to Zuffa Boxing and all the information that does come out. But yeah, that little shameless plug aside, fighter insurance is cracking. I like the sound of it. It is a positive. Positive number 6 is again something that is in the Muhammad Ali Act. Changes. Zuffa Boxing, if they have a fighter signed to them for 6 years, which is mandated, they can't go any higher than 6 years. We're not going to end up in a Conor McGregor situation where it's a 30, 40-year contract that they can't get out of until they physically retire. And even if they come back, they still have to get the blessing of the UFC. We're not going to have that. Basically, if you signed with Zuffa Boxing and they bench you, so they will not give you a fight, they still need to pay a minimum fee to you. Now, it is still a little bit ropey in terms of the actual fee. It is a $250 minimum per round for every boxer that fights for Zuffa Boxing. Whether that means they can get away with paying them something like £2,000 for that 6-month period where they haven't fought, I'm not sure. I would expect there to be some sort of clause put into the Muhammad Ali Act before the changes see the light of day that says it must be for a minimum of enter last fight round number here, which means that the fighters are then really realistically getting paid fairly if they are benched by Zuffa Boxing. It's not going to derail their financials. It might derail the career, which will be a negative, but they're still going to be getting paid handsomely for not actually doing anything, which is fair enough, to be honest. You don't get many jobs that would do that where you're off and you'll still get paid a significant amount of money. We're talking $40,000 a year upwards, maybe more. For me, that is the end of the positives. Let me know in the comments if there are any more positives that you think that I have missed. I am definitely intrigued as to see what the opinion of everybody who actually watches the sport of boxing, any boxing fans, what your take is in it from a positive point of view, if you have any. We'll go on to the bad now, so the negatives for Zuffa Boxing, and there's going to be a few of these, by the way, so strap yourselves in. Negative number 1, it's like the fighters are back at school. They're told what they can wear. They have to wear a specific uniform. That isn't just on fight night, by the way. It is also at the weigh-ins. They cannot choose their own underpants when signed for Zuffa Boxing. They must wear the Zuffa Boxing underpants. It is stupid. It is ridiculous. I absolutely hate that. Fighting in boxing as a whole is all about showing your flamboyance, building your personal brand, showing yourself off. Weigh-ins, maybe not, maybe from the more females in the sport of boxing. Ebony Bridges, for example, has her own unique, let's say, style of weighing in and what she wears and all of that kind of stuff. For male boxing, maybe the weigh-ins aren't too crazy for that kind of stuff. They just usually wear the same thing anyway. But still not being able to choose your underpants is ridiculous in my eyes. But on fight night, they have to wear the Zuffa colours. We've seen it recently where it is essentially black shorts or white shorts. They're told what they can wear. It is absolutely ridiculous. We will get no Nassim Hameds anymore when it comes to Zuffa Boxing. We're coming in his leopard print pants. His leopard print shorts, should I say. You're going to have no Tyson Fury coming out in his gypsy coloured gloves. You're going to have no Tyson Fury rocking up in the shorts that are the Union Jack colour. You are going to be mandated to, whatever they say, the boringest, plainest shorts of all time to wear. I'm not entirely sure how the glove situation works. I am assuming that the glove situation would be the same, where you have to wear whatever make, brand, colour of gloves that Zuffa Boxing mandate you to wear. It is stupid for the sport of boxing. It might work in MMA and the UFC. In boxing, it is all about expressing yourself, wearing whatever you want to wear, and to implement any sort of uniform, man. What are we? What are the boxers? Are they school kids? What are they going to say next? You've got to turn up to weigh-ins before you actually get undressed in a blazer with a little tie on. Like, come on, Dana, have a word with yourself. That's stupid. That is definitely a negative for me. Negative numero dos, number 2, employer over promoter. Essentially, promoters have now got to a point in boxing where the fighter is the boss. We have seen it many a time. The old school donking, Bob Arum of the olden days, that kind of I am your promoter and I am your boss mentality has gone from the sport of boxing, which is exactly the way it should be. The promoters are not the ones stepping in the ring, putting their lives on the line. You know, every single time that they step through the ropes, it is the boxer taking the risk. With the way that Zuffa Boxing is formulated, essentially while Dana White is at the helm, Dana White is their boss. He is their employer. He is not their promoter. He is not doing what is best for the boxer. He is doing what is best for the business. It is a employee-employer, a employee-boss relationship with Zuffa Boxing. I don't like that in the sport of boxing. I like the boxer to be the one who essentially is contracting in a promoter to guide their career, as opposed to working for the promoter itself. That is 1,000,000% as much as they say that they are revolutionizing boxing. That is 10 steps back, in my opinion, having that sort of relationship in play for these guys who are stepping in the ring and putting their lives on the line for the sport of boxing and to entertain their fans. So that is a big negative and a major step back to the olden days. Negative number 3, and some people are going to agree with this, some people are going to disagree with this: the one belt vision, the single belt in boxing vision, the one belt that matters, the one champion in every single weight division, as in just one world champion. Like, that for me is a major negative in the sport of boxing. What sets boxing aside from the UFC in terms of, you know, the sport in general and the hype that the sport builds is the fact that 2 guys, 3 guys, 4 guys can be recognized as the best in the world, and them guys go into undisputed world championship fights with each other to say, I am actually the top dog here. The undisputed champion is the man. What we'll get with Zuffa Boxing here is, if this took over and this went to that MMA philosophy, we would lose some mega fights. You know, there would not be as much hype around Tyson Fury versus Alexander Usyk, for example, if Tyson Fury was the main champion and Alexander Usyk was just a challenger. We wouldn't have fights like Errol Spence versus Terence Crawford doing the numbers that that fight did, because at the end of the day, the fighter who is the contender, other than what they have done in the sport in terms of performances and who they've beat, etc., they've got no credentials to back the claim that, look, no, I'm the best in the world. No, you're the best in the world. No, I'm the best in the world. You know, it completely dilutes the sport, in my opinion. And them big unification, them big undisputed fights in boxing that are the ones that bring in all of the eyes to the sport to see who the best man really is, they would completely disappear. We would get the same situation as like the UFC, for example. John Jones, Tom Aspinall. You know, a lot of people said that John Jones was the man. Tom Aspinall was probably better than John Jones at the time that all of the calling out was happening, but Tom Aspinall was being discredited because he isn't a world champion yet. We would get that in boxing. It would completely dilute the sport, in my opinion. It would take away from them mega nights where we have champion versus champion to see who the real top dog is. And for me, that one belt philosophy will absolutely drown the sport of boxing. It will completely dilute it. It will take it away. It will basically mean that MMA will be the more exciting sport rather than boxing, because at the end of the day, what boxing always has over the UFC is that unification and that undisputed fight that we can sink our teeth into, get the casual fans invested in, and, you know, really push it out to just general public, not just boxing fans, not just combat sport fans, etc. So for me, the single belt vision is an extremely bad negative for Zuffa Boxing's whole philosophy. The negative that I've got is the bad business practices from TKO. Maybe not quite Zuffa Boxing and Dana White, but the group that owns them, Seller, Zuffa, etc. Bad business practices. It's come out recently that Frank Warren is suing TKO for $1 billion because they essentially have gone back on a contract that they signed with Uncle Frank. They have formed Zuffa Boxing without the involvement of Frank Warren, which has essentially broken the contract that they have with that man. Now, $1 billion is crazy. He will probably come to that term because it's a $500 million deal that Paramount have done with Zuffa Boxing. So Frank's probably looking at that going, All right, okay, over the span of however long this deal is for, that's $500 million up front, sponsorships, etc., backing from Riyadh Season, Turkey Al Sheikh, all of that kind of stuff. It probably works out to the ballpark of $1 billion. Bad business practice from TKO from that point of view. Also something that recently came out, and this is really annoying because the Ring Magazine used to be the Bible of the sport of boxing. The Ring Magazine have essentially put out a propaganda post that essentially says that Frank Warren and Queensberry Boxing, or Queensberry Promotion should I say, are in financial trouble, and that the reason why they announced it or leaked the fact that they are suing them the day before the Fabio Wardley versus Daniel Dubois fight was because they are struggling to sell tickets. Now, the funny thing about that, the tickets aren't even on sale yet, so how can the tickets be selling poorly when they aren't even on sale? Like, come on, like, you've just literally thrown yourselves under a bus there. If you're putting your trusted media outlet that they acquired, as in Turkey Al Sheikh acquired, Riyadh Season acquired, who are backing Zuffa Boxing, TKO, Seller, all of that kind of stuff, if that trusted media outlet is putting that kind of propaganda out, for me it is a massive, massive red flag. These guys are doing anything that they can do to discredit the other promoters and the other competition that they have got in the sport, and that for me, it has no place in the sport of boxing at all. You can give it banter. I don't care about Dana White's comments about beating up babies, which is what he said about the other promoters and all that kind of stuff, and they aren't really putting on much of a challenge. You can say all that. We get that in normal boxing now. We get it with Ben Shalom and Eddie Hearn, for example. We've had it for years with Bob Arum, Eddie Hearn, PBC, Al Heyman, all of them kind of guys. We've had this for years. The banter, the discrediting from a media point of view, completely fine. But to say someone's business that is a successful business, the second biggest boxing promotion in the United Kingdom, is in trouble because you haven't backed them, that is a massive negative. And then to literally make up that the tickets aren't selling when the tickets can't sell because they aren't on sale yet, major red flag for me. Shady business practices. And if that ain't a red flag and that ain't enough for you guys to say nah, boycott that because they are not, they shouldn't be in our sport, I don't know what is. What do they need to do? Literally start having exhibition bouts between children? Come on. Bad business practices. Bad for boxing in as a whole. So that is a negative, funnily enough. A negative. Fixing, which is the philosophy, it's what they've said. Fixing boxing. Fixing a sport that's not broken. Boxing's worked for many, many years. We went through a bit of a lull during the Mayweather era where fighters didn't want to fight each other. They didn't want to lose the O, etc. We had a lot of fighters who were vacating championships, so they didn't have to take on tough challenges. All of that kind of stuff. But in terms of now, with how boxing's been in the last few years, and to be fair, this comes from the involvement of Saudi Arabia and Turkey Al Sheikh, Riyadh Season. The fights that we've been wanting to see, man, we have been seeing them. There is no way before he came into boxing that we would have seen Canelo versus Terence Crawford. Crawford jumping up realistically 3 weight classes to fight Canelo Alvarez. There is probably no way we would have seen Tyson Fury versus Alexander Usyk ever because they would have ran away from each other. But regardless, them fights have happened. We have had some absolute crackers as of late. We have had Devin Haney versus Ryan Garcia, massive fight, that one. We have had the likes of Artur Beterbiev versus Dmitry Bivol, mega fight. Alexander Usyk that I mentioned earlier versus Tyson Fury, huge fight. We are going to be getting Nakatani versus Naoya Inoue, which is a crazy fight, which a lot of casual fans probably won't know about, won't be interested in. That is a crazy fight to make. The sport as it is right now, with the backing of Saudi Arabia and Turkey Al Sheikh, it don't need fixing. The sport is absolutely bang on the way it is. We get undisputed world championship fights that I mentioned earlier in the video. We are now getting the fights between the top guys at the right times. We're not having to wait until they're both past the prime like Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao. We are getting the fights we want. The sport is on everybody's lips at the moment. When it comes to the UFC versus boxing debate, or MMA versus boxing debate, however you want to spin it, at the moment, boxing is undoubtedly winning because it's all over the news. People are tuning in to watch. Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr., who are not top-level fighters by any stretch of the imagination, sold out a stadium twice in the United Kingdom. Craziness. We are almost back at this point in time. In fact, not even almost. At this point in time, we are back to the good old days of boxing, where you get in the fights we want, the public are interested, and more people are getting involved and getting into the sport that we all love. It don't need fixing. Don't change anything fundamentally. If you want to come and be another promoter with a load of cash, back it all the way. Fixing the sport and changing the whole structure, not needed. Not needed. Now, another quite big negative, and this one is actually a bit worrying for fighter safety and fighter health. We are not having the tweener weight classes in Zuffa Boxing. They will only recognise 8 weight divisions, and one of them is actually is cruiserweight, which technically is a tweener division, but still, you know, the other tweener divisions, super welterweight, super middleweight, super lightweight, super bantamweight, super featherweight, etc. We will not have them in Zuffa Boxing. Why is that a worry? There is a bit of a bigger jump between weight classes now. So rather than having to jump up a few pounds, you're having to jump up a substantial amount more pounds. So if I look at, for example, middleweight to light heavyweight now, you are going from 160 pounds to 175 pounds. If you are too big to be a middleweight, realistically because of your frame, but you are too small to be a light heavyweight, let's say Canelo Alvarez, for example, you're going to really struggle. You're not going to want to jump up to light heavyweight and fight the guys who are going to be substantially bigger than you. You also are putting yourself at risk when you're going down to middleweight because your frame can't do it. Your frame can't do it. You're going to be more dehydrated because you've got to take the weight off before the fight. It's not a good look. We've seen it in MMA. We've seen it in the UFC. These fighters sometimes come in to the weigh-ins and it is actually worrying the way that they look. We literally recently, was it UFC 2 or 324, I think, had a fighter faint as he was stepping off the scales and walking back. It's scary. That's a negative, a major negative. If you're going to do boxing properly. Put the tweener weights back in and, you know, do it in the right way. I don't want to see fighters in predicaments where they are getting physically injured, damaged, potentially having to retire, maybe even some fatal stuff going on because they have had to boil themselves down to a weight that they cannot make. So major negative for me, that one. Now, another negative, you are ring fencing fighters. So it's publicly been announced that Dana White, once the Muhammad Ali exchanges come in and he can form his UBO, which is what Zuffa Boxing will become, his boxing league, etc., he won't be playing ball with any of the other governing bodies. That means a Zuffa world champion will never fight a WBC world champion, for example, and it doesn't matter if the the undisputed, let's call it proper boxing, because that's the established sport at the moment, a proper undisputed world champion will never fight the Zuffa world champion because they're not going to give up the belts. Dana and Zuffa will not play ball with the other governing bodies. So you're essentially got a pot of fighters there that we are never going to see them fight the best because the best will be outside of Zuffa Boxing. And them established undisputed champions are not going to come over to Zuffa to fight for a belt that is not an established belt and have to sign up to a stupid deal to fight the Zuffa world champion. It's essentially going to be a plastic belt for at least 5, maybe 10 years. And that, if it can take off, I still think because of the legacy of the sport of boxing, which I will come on to in a second, I still think the guys who really want to make a splash in the sport rather than just make some cash in the sport, should rap me, shouldn't I? They will not go over to Zuffa Boxing because it would actually ruin their legacy at the end of the day. So yeah, you're ring fencing fighters to your own pot of fighters there, and they are never going to be the elite of the elite, in my opinion anyway. But let me know if you agree with that one in the comments. Another negative. We've got a lot of these, haven't we? God. A lot of negatives, yes. They have no respect. Zuffa Boxing, Dana White, etc. They've got no respect for the legacy of the sport of boxing. The fighters that have won the big green belt, Muhammad Ali, Floyd Mayweather, them guys, what you're essentially saying with Zuffa Boxing is, yeah, you won them world championships at the time, but we wasn't around. We're the real champions, so anybody who's got this Zuffa belt automatically goes ahead of you in terms of legacy because they've got the proper boxing belt. Regardless of what you think about lineal champions and all that kind of stuff. They're essentially saying that the current landscape of boxing, the landscape of boxing that has been around from its inception, it's a load of crap. You're literally shitting on the legacy of boxing there. Like, and there is no apologies about it. It is, your sport is crap. Let's make it more like our sport at the UFC. It's not good, is it? When you say it like that, it's not good. It's not a good look. So yeah, no respect for the legacy of the sport of boxing. Probably with that goes hand in hand with no respect for the fighters, for the champions of yesteryears. So yeah, negative for me. Now the final point of the video, the final negative, is the man in charge of Zuffa Boxing, Dana White. Great promoter for the UFC. Great promoter of MMA as a sport. He essentially made MMA that household sport. When it comes to boxing, he is a failed boxing promoter. He has had multiple attempts to get into boxing. He has failed. He tried as a boxing promoter and landed on MMA. Did very, very well with MMA. Different sports entirely. You've essentially built that sport from the ground up. You've made that sport exactly how you want it. Very Americanized, very monopolized, and he's done good at that. But when it comes to the established sport of boxing, he's had a few goes. He has failed every single time. There was a Discovery Plus, I think, or Discovery Channel series that he brought out, which was similar to his UFC series that he has got, where he gets up-and-coming fighters in, and he tried to make that work with boxing. It fell flat on his face, was cancelled after the first season. He then discarded boxing altogether, went off. Ultimate Fighter is what I was thinking of for the UFC. I don't know why it didn't come to my head. But yeah, he tried that in boxing. That did not work. That was his entry point to boxing. But he was backed by a big channel. It failed. He failed in that instance. Let me know if you agree with all of the positives, all of the negatives. Let me know if I've missed anything off that you can think of. Let me know if I've opened your eyes to Zuffa Boxing and the practices that they have put in place and all of that kind of stuff. I'm sure there will be more that comes out. I'm sure that there will be a lot of changes to the Muhammad Ali Act from what Dana White has proposed at the moment. It's something that it can work. You've just got to stop this philosophy of fixing boxing. Go and do your own thing. If you want a boxing league and you want it to be known as a developmental league for boxing to give lower tier fighters and them not established stars a bit of a platform to launch off of, and then you just make money as a general boxing promoter, crack on. Fine by me. But in the way that they are branding this at the moment, the philosophy, the mindset, the game plan, it's all wrong for boxing in my opinion. All wrong. I don't like it. Off the back of the Frank Warren thing, I do think that it should realistically be boycotted. I'm willing to give it a chance as long as it does not harm boxing as a whole and they kind of stay in their own lane. But let me know in the comments what's your opinions. For more boxing content, hit that follow or subscribe button depending on where you're watching this. And as always, a like, a favourite, a save, a share, a repost, all of that good stuff is appreciated. Peace out.